Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk about planning performance domain, which is one of the very critical domains as part of project performance domains. So we already discussed stakeholders, team performance and development approach performance domains. And today we're going to continue next domain, which is a planning performance. The activities and functions that are associated with the planning performance domains are, initial, ongoing, and evolving organization and coordination necessary for delivering the project deliverables and outcomes. So you'll be dealing with, as a project manager, you'll be dealing with the functions and activity associated with initial planning, ongoing planning, and evolving organization, and the coordination required to deliver the project deliverables and outcomes. The effective execution of this performance domain results in the following desired outcomes. So following are the desired outcomes of a planning performance domain. What are my desired outcomes? The project should progress in an organized and coordinated manner. There should be a holistic approach to deliver the project outcomes. Evolving information should be progressively elaborated. So your initial planning, high-level planning need to be elaborated in a high-level into detailed plan according to the phases, according to the life cycle of the project. Time spent planning is appropriate for the situation. Your schedule, your budget is appropriately adjusted. This is current in nature. So all those things appropriate to the situation of the project. How did you adjust when the changes come to you? How did you manage using your management reserves or contingency reserves? The planning information is sufficient. You need to have a sufficient planning information to manage the stakeholder expectation. Are you providing adequate information for your stakeholders? That's the question. There should be a process of adaptation in terms of changes, in terms of emergencies. Do you have a contingency reserves? Do you have management resources? Can you adjust to it? Can you get an additional budget if there is a huge change coming on your way? Can you adopt plan based on the market conditions? So these are the desired outcomes of effective execution. So we will see that what are the things we can do, activities and function, and the factors involved in this domain for effective execution. And finally, we'll see that what are the manner in which we can check these desired outcomes. So let's start with few key terms or a few key definitions where you know we need to understand before we get into the details of this domain. We know what is an estimate. Estimate is a quantitative assessment of particular deliverable in terms of cost, in terms of schedule, or in terms of effort, right? Accuracy, it's an assessment of correctness. How accurate our estimation? Is it 90% accurate or 100% accurate? Precision is an assessment of exactness, right? Tell that it's going to take 20 hours of work. How precise you are on multiple times when the similar works comes to you, right? Crashing and fast tracking, both are schedule compression techniques. Crashing is a schedule compression technique. You will reduce or shorten the schedule by adding more resources. So you can complete the 10-month projects in 5 months by adding double the resources. Fast tracking is managing the sequence activities, do it in parallel way so that you can compress your schedule by 10% or 20% or 50%, whatever it is. What do you mean by budget? Budget is an approved estimate for complete work of the project to be executed. So let's get into a planning overview. What is a planning and what is its overview about it? Planning is an approach to create project deliverables. Right? You need to develop an approach to create a project deliverables. Depends on the type of the life cycle, whether it was predictive or adaptive. How are you going to sequence your picks? How are you going to sequence your stories? How will I prioritize it? You need to have some kind of an approach in place to create project deliverables, right? You need a what is the sequence in which I want to plan, what is the sequence in which I want to execute that. That's very important. High level planning begins prior to the project authorization, right? So executive leadership or strategic leadership or even middle layer leadership involves in high level planning even before the project is getting authorized, right? It's possible quite 80 to 90% of the project is this process is happening. Then when you authorize, you will know what is the exact budget you can authorize and everything. That will help you. High level planning at earlier level will help you progressively elaborate, your vision and chart and business case, right? So team is elaborating the high level planning given by the leadership team. Then project management team and project members team progressively elaborate those, right? Your initial project planning to consider social and environmental impacts, so that you can do that product life cycle assessment. You can understand the impact of the materials and process, etc. How is affect this impact of materials and processes and product life cycle assessment is going to affect the social and environmental impacts, right? So go for adequate planning, not excessive planning. Just enough planning is enough. Excessive planning, it's one kind of a waste as per lean. Planning artifacts, to map the stakeholder expectations. So your deliverables and stakeholder expectations need to be mapped. You can create a simple Excel document or a PowerPoint presentation to map our deliverables with the business outcomes. What are the variables that influence planning? PMBOK talks about 5 variables. The development approach. Based on the predictive or adaptive method, your planning will change. In a predictive method, you do a very detailed planning and you try to complete 80% of the planning and then you start executing it. But in an adaptive method, you just do just enough planning for a particular release and start with the sprint, start executing it, right? So that's how the based on the development approach, the planning approach changes. The project deliverables depends on the domain in which you deal, whether it was a construction domain or software domain, your planning will change, right? In a construction domain, you will plan your phases sequentially. In an adaptive method, you can plan your things in an iterative manner. So accordingly, you need to plan, how many sprints you need, how many releases you need, whether you need a continuous delivery accordingly, right? If it is a continuous delivery, what kind of a tools and automation is required. So you need to do appropriate planning for that. Depends organization requirements is one influence factor for planning, right? Depends on the organization culture and structure. You may need to produce and required documentation or required policy, mapping the policy things. All the things are there. Managing the market conditions, right? If the market conditions are very dynamic and you need to produce the product, as quickly as possible and periodically, right? You can go for adaptive approaches, right? You can plan accordingly, right? So market condition help you, if the market condition does not change, is a very stable condition, you can go for very detailed planning or something. If the market conditions are changing continuously, you can go for short planning and then execute the tested product in the market and change it and redo it. That's how you can do that. And legal regulatory things also controlling the planning, right? So depends on the legal things and regulatory things. Your deliverables might change. You have to sequence the deliverables in a different way, and you need to go for certain certifications and approvals and everything. So you have to sequence and then plan those things to be done as part of it. You have to manage the standards to be achieved, quality standards to be achieved as per the regulatory norms, right? So let's get into different components of planning, right? So first one is the delivery, right? The planning begins with understanding of the business case, the product scope, and the project scope. So business case will talk about business outcomes or the smart goals that project is going to achieve. The product scope talks about the features and attributes of the product to be completed, or the standard quality standards of product. The project scope talks about the work involved in developing a product, right? In a predictive planning, you start with the scope statement and you elaborate in a WBS. In adaptive planning, you start with epics and features and you elaborate into stories, right? The second important aspect in planning is estimation, right? There are a number of ways you can present your estimation. There is a deterministic way of presenting estimation, telling that this project will take 36 months. Precisely. It is always riskier to provide a deterministic information if the certain things are uncertain in nature, if the certain things are not unknown areas. It's very difficult. In that scenario, you can go for probabilistic estimation, where you talk about in a range 36 months plus or minus 6 months, and you can tell that this project will take either 30 months or 42 months with a 95% of confidence and with the distribution data along with that. You can go with the absolute estimation with saying that this particular activity is going to take 120% hours. Instead of that, you can go for relative sizing. Most of the adaptive methods in current scenario, we are using relative sizing. We use the method called planning poker, which tells that compared to my previous story, how long it's going to take, right? Compared to earlier story that took 20 story point, it might take this might take 24 story points. So compare and see that relatively how big it is and get into a consensus and then go with an estimate. There is a flow-based estimation which talks about cycle time and throughput. Cycle time is your execution time. Throughput is how much of work can be completed, how many stories can be completed within 2 weeks of throughput. 2 weeks of sprint is a cycle time. Velocity is my throughput actually. How much of 10 stories I can complete the throughput. So with the 2 weeks of 10 stories can be completed is one way of providing an estimation, flow-based estimation. So all these methods you can do then as testing of estimation for uncertainty. You can add a contingency, you can use earned value analysis to forecast and adjust your estimates, right? The third aspect in planning is schedule, right? Schedule is a model of executing activities. It's a model that gives the way of executing the activities along with the dependencies and durations, right? In a predictive method, you decompose your scope statement to WBS and sequence the activities and estimate each activity and allocate resources and adjust. You can use crashing and fast tracking for schedule compression. In adaptive methods, we do a release planning and then for each release we do a number of iteration planning. Release planning generally can be done quarterly. Iteration plans are done bi-weekly or monthly. And every iteration will have a daily stand-up for 15 minutes. Right? This is one example of adaptive schedule. Right? The product vision drives the roadmap drives the release plans. The release plan establishes the iteration. The iteration plan talks about the stories to be developed and it will further talk about the task involved in a particular user story. Right? The fourth important component in the planning is the budget. You need to estimate what are the how much of cost going to involve for each work package, and you can add cost of all the work packages and you can come into work cost estimate, which is a cost baseline. And you can add contingency reserve to the cost baseline that has become a project budget. Then you will be adding a management reserve which is exclusive of the project budget. Project budget and management reserve together, it's becoming a total budget. What are the other components in planning? You need to tweak your planning, or you need to do your planning according to these factors. The project team composition and structure, right? So you need to plan your team composition and structure. What is my domain of operation? Whether I'm in a construction domain or in a pharmaceutical domain or in a software domain, what are the skill set I need, right? Whether it is a predictive domain or adaptive domain, right? Whether you need a cross-functional team, whether you need a functional team, or difference you can decide. Communication planning is very important component in our planning. Your project plan should have communication management plan. Communication management plan will tell you how the plan will be done, who will be doing it, how the planning will be reviewed, how the performance will be reviewed, what are the reports you need, who are the stakeholders will be needing that report, how frequently you need that. All those communication planning, attached data planning is need to be done as part of your project planning. Physical resources planning, how many laptops you need, how many facilities you need. So all those things you need to figure it out. What are the physical resources you need, right? Then once your physical resource is estimated, you can go for procurement. Based on your resource planning, you can decide whether you can go for make or buy, right? What is cheap for you, what is better for you, whether you have a competency to develop it within the cost. If you don't have competency, why don't you offshore it, or why don't you buy a product directly? So similarly, whatever the tools you need, communication tools and other physical resources, you need to procure according to that. And you have to do a change management planning as part of the project planning. Right? In an adaptive style of projects, you can accommodate changes at any point of time. Right? Within even the sprint execution, you can change you can accept the changes from the customers. But in a predictive approach, the change management approach should be available. You should be having a change log, you should be having a change approving mechanism and doing impact analysis, and you should having a meeting and then come to a conclusion and consensus that these are the changes been accepted and this is how we're going to do that. Then you have to change your budget and planning according to that, right? And metrics planning, right? What are the metrics you want to measure? How I am going to measure my performance, right? Based on once I baseline my project with my schedule and budget, I want to understand my current situation. Either I'm using a earned value analysis or a typical schedule variance or cost variance. Right, you can understand these metrics. So metrics planning is very important to adjust and align to the new things that are coming into your way actually. So you need to align with your project planning should align with the other parallel projects, other parallel track. Right? You are working on one stream. How this particular stream is getting aligned other projects in the portfolio. So very important, aligning your project planning with overall portfolio is very important, right? So with that, we discussed all the required components of project planning. Let's discuss how I'm going to check the results of desired outcomes. We started with 6 desired outcomes, right? The project progress should be in an organized and coordinated manner. How I will be checking that project progress is in organized manner. You can use a method of performance review of project results against the project baselines. Check that project variances or performance variances are within the thresholds. That's one way of checking the project is in progressing in an organized and coordinated manner. How will be checking the holistic approach to ensuring that the delivery schedule and funding resource availability demonstrate that project is planned in a holistic manner with no gaps and areas of misalignment. Right? We're planning or funding and scheduling to ensure that our project is having no gaps and no misalignment with your overall portfolio, no gaps in terms of business outcomes. Right? Progressive elaboration. How do I check it? Your current information of the project should demonstrate appropriate elaboration. Right? You need to compare your scope statement and while you are in requirement phase, how it is getting elaborated into WBS, into your design and other implementation stage. So the current information compared to the business case indicates that the project is progressing, producing the right deliverables and outcomes. Right? By checking the current information and planning, you need to understand that the planning is done elaborative, progressively elaborative manner. It is covering all the required deliverables for a particular phase and everything. Right? And demonstrate that level of planning is appropriate, right? For every phase of the project or every life cycle you demand it. Do you have whatever the required level of planning is done at every stage? Do you have the required project plans and documents is available, right? And the communication to ensuring periodically checking with your stakeholders that are you getting a right set of reports, the communication is sufficient for you. So you need to have every periodically you need to check that once you establish the communication management plan, the reporting schedules and the way in which you want to communicate the measurement, the variances and everything, right? You can have a feedback session with stakeholders that are they getting sufficient information, do they need something addition or so they don't want to remove something. So you can adjust your communications according to the feedback from them. And process of adoption. How do I check the process of adoption? To ensure that backlog is getting adopted throughout the project. Right? For every sprint, are you getting the changes? Based on the changes, are you prioritizing your backlogs? Right? And then in a predictive method, are you maintaining a change control process? Are you maintaining a change log? Are you providing a required documentation of analysis, required documentation of change control board meetings, right? To demonstrate the change control process. So these are the ways and means in which you can check the desired outcomes of effective execution of project planning performance domain. So with that, we come to a conclusion of planning performance domain. Please share your comments. What are the other topics you would like to discuss in the project management? And we will see you in